Hey there, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George Affleck.
And it's time for
UnSpun.
You legitimately get me every time. Just for the record, George never tells me how he's going to.
I don't know what I'm going to do.
Until the moment.
It just comes out of my head. It's sometimes weird.
Was there some Rolling Stones tied into that?
Yeah.
We got to talk about that.
We'll talk about it later.
Yes, we will. But we got to start with the big story. And is it a big story or is it not a big story? It's big for us and those who get into the politics and really break down the scandals or maybe look to unspin the headlines when it comes to politics. Do you call this a speed bump? Do you call it a train wreck? Do you call it a nightmare for Justin Trudeau?
You mean this decision, the decision that he was in a conflict?
In the Ethics Commission's report.
Basically saying, you are a naughty boy, Justin.
You broke the law, is what they basically said, right?
Yeah, sure. He pushed the boundaries of what's acceptable ethically, according to them, and he didn't apologize. He didn't pull a Gregor Robertson yet, which he might closer to the election if he needs to, because that worked for Gregor to apologize to the people, and that won in the election. So he didn't apologize.
Was that, I'm sorry I wasn't listening to you?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
And then he went off and won and didn't listen again for another 4 years.
He would never answer
They
the
showed
phone.
him that last time. Oh, wait, he didn't run.
Let's go back, though, to Justin Trudeau,
yes.
because we were watching this very closely. We've been talking about Jody Wilson-Raybould, who, I mean, he came at her. The federal Liberals, came at her in such a way.
Well, we talked a lot about this.
For her to not get an apology out of immediately out of the gate.
He respected the decision.
And accepted the report. But refused to apologize. I know, it was quite some spin, man.
Well, he tried his best to make it work for him. It's a challenge. And we've talked a lot about this, and the backroom world of caucus and how United Caucus is very, very challenging all the time, and having been in a caucus and being a chair of a caucus and keeping your team in line or whipped or whatever you want to call it is not always possible. And obviously in this case, and potentially she might have taking down the government and destroying what Trudeau has built up. But I think that what's interesting is, the alternative to Canadians right now is Scheer. Is that the big question is, are people willing to vote for Scheer over Trudeau, or are they willing to go, you know what, I'll stick with this guy because I don't like Scheer? So the campaigns will be interesting to see how they do it. Where will Jody Wilson-Raybould land on this? I mean, I think she's, this is a great, if this had happened October 1st, it would be very helpful for her election as an independent in her riding, but it's still mid-August, low time of summer. People aren't really paying attention, and we've seen some analogies, some stories on Twitter. I think Keith Baldry said it, somebody else. I asked 30 friends and they don't know what I'm talking about.
Like they don't even know who Jody Wilson-Raybould is.
Yeah.
So it's good that you're watching UnSpun podcast right now so that you can stay up to speed on what is actually happening in our country, because we could all probably quote the fact that Trump's latest campaign rally was in New Hampshire. Like, we're so keyed in and locked into what's happening south of the border that it does impact us to some degree, but it doesn't really impact us the way our own federal, provincial and municipal governments would impact us. So this is a good moment to say you should subscribe to the Fin at the Orca.ca. You should be following George Affleck at Jody Vance. We'll get into Twitter trolls and such coming up later. They're not coming on the top of the show. Not off the top of the show. Let me just put it this way. I got a shout out in the BC Poly Hot Stove, Jordan Bateman and McLean K. Yes. Jordan's like, I'm the bad fish. Jody's getting treated like the bad fish on Twitter. He's feeling like he's not stepping up enough. Jordan,
in our pods,
get on your game. But back to Trudeau.
Be more hated, George.
Yeah, right. Take the heat off me. McLean says I'm too honest. This just in.
Is that possible?
I don't know. Apparently so. I should check my.
Yes.
I'll get into that
Anyways,
later.
So Jody, I think Jody.
I've
always argued I don't think she'll win. And there is now a candidate for the Liberals.
Talib Mohammed.
Yes, and he will be taking on the Conservative, and then there's going to be a Green Party, an Independent, probably 10 other people.
Talib ran in North Van and lost there.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Right. So now he's
in Shaughnessy,
Granville South.
South.
I don't know.
She's got a book coming out.
I'm not a good predictor of such things, but my gut says there are a lot of women voters who are going to be in support of the woman who stood up to the Prime Minister, went through the shitstorm. Sorry, I'll turn off the ringer on my phone. Went through that shitstorm, took a massive hit, not only to her reputation, but to her resume, her future opportunities. Now she's running as an independent, as we know. Like, she was the Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada. She must have some good qualities in there that got knocked down for what we're now seeing through the Ethics Committee's report, that she didn't deserve that. And I think if enough people pay attention, I believe there might be that little bump, but you know way more about politics than I do, and campaigning certainly, that this is too far out for it to really have, to resonate enough for her to be elected. Is that what you're saying?
That's my argument. I also think people will look at Trudeau, they'll look at the leadership of the parties, and they'll look at Trudeau and they say, and you think, okay, this was an ethics decision. Was he naive, or was it strategic? Was he just being naive because he's new at the job? I don't know.
What do you think? Come on, what do you think for sure?
Well, I always think that there's always things that go on behind the scenes that people don't know about. And sometimes there is some pressure when you are a leader to do things that you may feel uncomfortable with. And it's at that point you have to be, you have to think about what does this make sense, and I think he was pressured probably to go go in there and try to push that agenda, and clearly, as it turns out, went too far. But was that because he's naive, or was it strategic? I think he'll play the naive card for the election campaign. I was just trying to, Canada's, See,
and I
think people will fall for that.
He's certainly sticking to the script, as the Conservatives and perhaps others will continue to attack on the fact that this is corruption at the highest level in the Canadian government. And what's the name? The OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, is a global organization that rates countries on their level of corruption. They're actually looking at Canada now based on this Ethics Commission report. The RCMP have spoken, apparently, we'll have more on this next week, to Jody Wilson-Raybould about this. The RCMP very rarely say if they're investigating something unless they're laying charges. There are no charges laid here, but they are saying, we are looking into this.
And I would be very surprised if either of those organizations have any kind of decision before October 20th.
Right.
So the impact, if they do that, and it's bad, then that definitely will hurt. But
it'll keep it in the news cycle, perhaps.
And that's all Jody Wilson needs.
That's
somehow to stay. She's got her book coming out. There's also a book coming out, pro Trudeau, coming out around the same time.
Dueling books.
So they cancel each other out.
You should write a book.
Why not? Everybody does. I've written 2 already, by the way.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oops.
I have. Yeah. But thanks for remembering.
Well, you always love my columns when I'm like, have you read it? Oh, right, I got to read that. But we'll keep our eyes on this. I had a conversation with Peter MacKay, former Justice Minister and Attorney General under Stephen Harper. I was filling in for Charles Adler last night. It's Friday as we're taping this, so it was Thursday night. And I found it interesting because I expected...
He's a conservative.
Yes, under Stephen Harper. He was from 1997 to 2016. This man has been in government.
A lot of time thought of as the heir apparent to Harper. Didn't happen,
but he came on the line with me, and I was expecting sort of the spin that you get from many politicians, current or former, that are very locked into their partisanship. And I was expecting him to say, it's just that this Liberal government is bad from the top down, and da-da-da. And I said, I don't know if this is an appropriate question to ask you, Peter, but had you been in the situation that Jody Wilson-Raybould found herself in with regard to SNC-Lavalin and the...
Sirens, if you can hear that in the background.
It's just like, it's sirens for Canada. But I asked him straight up, if you were put in this position about the DPA, would you have done anything differently than she did? And he actually said, I would have done exactly what she did, because you have to.
Really?
But he did say that on national radio, where he could have just dodged the question. I kind of appreciated the fact that he didn't.
And he's not in government anymore, and he's not really a member of the Conservative Party, and anyway.
Right.
But you go ahead.
Right. So, but most
I'm a bit cynical about this, but okay.
But I'm just pointing it out because I like the unspun piece of it.
Yes.
I'm not saying that I'm all of a sudden a huge Peter MacKay fan and voting Conservative, but in this ongoing dialogue, I think it's important. I guess I do feel kind of good for Jody Wilson-Raybould that even her biggest possible detractors are saying, you know what, you've been done wrong. And it's not just because she spells her name with a Y. It's because I appreciate it.
Took me a minute there.
Jody with a Y. We're few and far between.
Wilson?
No, but
the first one.
The acknowledgement of how she was really eaten by the machine for standing up for what she believed to be what was right. And the Ethics Commission has basically said she was in the right. Moving on to the economy.
What can I say?
No, I know. I just wanted to be heard. Thank you for listening.
I agree. No, it's interesting, and I wonder how that's landing with the Conservatives. That him saying that publicly, whether it's if they're happy or sad about him saying he would have done the same thing. And sometimes when people leave government and leave the party, just stay quiet. Don't talk about stuff. We're in charge. We're in charge here.
Talk.
We need to put our agenda forward.
That's the only time we're getting any sort of. Well, I don't know, level of normalcy out of the Republican Party south of the border are people that aren't running for re-election. Like, come on. That's, right?
That's why I'm here.
That was really hypocritical, wasn't it? Where he's like, once you've been in office, stop talking. It's like, here's the regular podcast.
I couldn't stop talking when I was in the government.
I know.
That's probably my biggest flaw.
But let's, no, I love that about it. That's why we do what we do.
I don't think my party liked it much.
So what? Let's change the world one podcast at a time, George Affleck. Economy in the United States, wow. When my money advisor, and I'm not big money girl, they're calling me. No, they called me the day before and said, just be ready.
Wait a minute. Is that someone, they got a line into Trump's Twitter account?
No.
His pre-Twitter account?
They
know what he's going to say?
They were explaining that there was a pullback into a certain area.
Can I get the number for your guy, woman, person, please? I don't think mine was quite as nimble, but I haven't looked because
I appreciate Greg Voss.
Well, send your donations to Curve Communications, George at Curve Communications for all sponsorship opportunities.
Hey, we might have a new sponsor coming next week.
All right.
So hang with the program. So our economy is getting better here in this particular room, but the economy in the United States nosedives. Canadian economy is like right up.
And especially if you're in Ontario, where things are just starting to get potentially better, and BC's been quite strong for a long time, and generally when Ontario is strong, BC's weak. But if America really sucks, it's bad for Canada. Just bad, and bad for the world economy too. But this is Bill Maher's dream come true. He's been saying this, his show.
Why?
Because he says that's the only way to get rid of Trump. If the economy crashes and Trump's in charge, he can't use that as a winning formula. Trust me, the economy's doing great. No, the economy sucks.
Is that
why? Vote for me.
Yesterday on Twitter, he was saying that the election process is corrupt?
He's trying to find now. Of course, if the economy crashes, he's got to find a new angle.
Another way.
That's excuse the quote marks, brilliance of Trump. He's always one step. He's always managed to change the subject. Pivot.
There's so much volatility, and not just in the U.S. Like Hong Kong.
It's scary. Democracy. And it's interesting. I've been seeing some people even on my Facebook feed that I'm quite surprised who were stuck in Hong Kong and who were saying supportive things about the Chinese government because they felt like they were trapped in this what was a scary moment, and felt that these guys were getting too violent and were and it was strange. There was a strange conversations going on. I'm thinking
supporting Hong Kong police was one. There's actually a real controversy that sparked this morning. Mulan 2. The live-action Mulan, Disney's been pulled into this because the lead actress in Mulan 2 went on her Twitter to her, I think, 52 million followers and said she supports the police in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. And that pulls Disney into the conflict.
She's a mainland Chinese person? Do we know?
Apparently so. I don't know a lot about her, but on her Twitter, it was very clear. And now there's a boycott Mulan hashtag that's trending.
Yeah.
So
I was listening to New York Times podcast, and I recommend that to everybody. It's a really good podcast, The Daily. Yeah. And they were talking about this mentality of obviously mainland Chinese and Hong Kong, and there's this whole world. They're worlds apart, and they'll never be the same. And so this is going to end in two ways. One way, tragically and horribly, with the police. You see them lined up, doing a Tiananmen Square kind of thing, or this will start to bleed into all other parts of China, and you'll see these kinds of things starting to happen.
An uprising.
Yeah,
which will also probably end in significant bloodshed. There's no really simple end to this. Like Donald Trump is like, I think it'll end really quickly. It'll just be a very simple answer. You just got
this is a movement.
President Xi just needs to sit down with a couple of people, and it'll just be sorted out in 15 minutes. He actually said that on the lawn yesterday. I can't even with the simplistic nature with which we look at the happenings worldwide through the lens
from the
of
grade 3
45
person.
So in reference to what's happening in Hong Kong and how it might impact us here in British Columbia, there's a lot of discussion about. There's 800,000 people.
I think Vancouver alone has 300,000. Hong Kong who don't actually reside here. So there's a solution to our empty homes. It's all these people, if they're the ones who own these empty homes, hey, I guess they're coming.
But they said
our restaurants will do very well, I guess.
Right.
I mean, we'll have a whole bunch more people living here in these empty condos. I don't know. I'm joking a little bit because it's there is this, but I think that the impact that if all of these people suddenly come back to Canada is actually complicated and challenging.
It's going to jack up the price if they're coming back to buy.
Yeah, buying it and just to live here.
We got a lot going on. We got a lot going on that global sense, on that federal sense, but like right here, ground zero, Vancouver, downtown Eastside. You on Twitter right now. If you're not following George_Affleck, you should be. Great conversation about hashtag DTES, because people are pointing out, for you and I, we're a part of the city. We have watched. We talk about the Granville Entertainment District. I got so much flack for calling it a war zone last week.
Yes, Charles Gauthier is not happy with you.
That's okay though, because he opened up a good discussion. You can be unhappy with me. Prove to me that it's not a war zone, because when I'm there, it feels like that to me, and we're very different.
Friday at 12 o'clock or 1 in the morning.
A woman by themselves Friday at 1 o'clock on the downtown east side. It does not. Or
at the
Global Entertainment District. But the downtown
east side. If you walk
east
down
side,
Granville, head towards Hastings, and we've talked about this before, turn right on Hastings, heading east, and you see a whole other
slice of humanity, shall we say?
Yeah, it's ugly, and it's getting uglier as far as the devastation that we're seeing down there. The sadness,
it's gotten uglier.
The alcoholism, the drugs,
but even just
chaos.
In the last couple of months, right?
Yeah, it just seems to be, it's a continued decline, and they continue on over to Oppenheimer Park, where we have over 100 tents now. 200 tents. And I call 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, whenever it was, before I said, once we let in a couple of tents, and 3 or 4 and 5 or 10, 20, 30, 40, it's just, you can't, how do you stop that? The council has made a decision, obviously as a majority. The mayor has spoken and said this, but he would only do this if he knew he had a majority support in council, that he's not going to do anything about these tents until he has homes for all these people. When I was in office with Vision, we made decisions in camera. You'd make these decisions that this was not suitable and not safe. And the tents, and we'd get an injunction, and we'd move them along. And you have to kind of do that. I know it seems cruel to people, but otherwise you have now Oppenheimer Park. What park is next? What next location do you suddenly have tents popping up? It's not a safe circumstances for anybody, and it's not the way we should be allowing housing to be built. It's going to end badly in so many ways. And now we have Oppenheimer Park maxed out. We have downtown Eastside on Hastings. Craziness. And part of that has to do with a decision that Vision and we all made about this downtown Eastside plan. And that's what I've been calling out, saying this community plan that we put forward in about 2013-14 is not working. It was the plan itself in its base level is completely setting it up for failure, because you have to build pretty much only social housing down there. You are not permitted to build a market rental in almost anywhere in the downtown east side. Some pockets on the sort of slightly east, but generally, which by the way is being bought up by 2 or 3 developers, all the areas that are not that area, but the downtown east side, along that whole strip of Hastings, you're not permitted to develop down there in any capacity of what people will refer to as gentrification. And it's creating this situation where
it's a mandated
nothing
ghetto,
is happening, and it's a mandated ghetto. I think that's Michael Geller. That's what he calls it, and he's been very outspoken about this.
Because what's the benefit? What's the draw for a developer to build an SRO? Like, is there?
Well, there has to be significant funding from the federal government or provincial government to pay for that, to make it viable, and it can't. And developers don't build social housing; they build market rental.
Even affordable market is better than. From a developer standpoint, that must be better return on investment than an SRO.
Yeah. I mean, co-ops are one avenue that developers can kind of get into, but even then it's private. Like you look at this False Creek area where there's some private co-ops that were built by rich people who wanted to give back, and they built these places. Yeah. I don't see that happening on the downtown east side right now. I mean, there are billionaires in Vancouver that maybe could use some good PR these days.
Chip!
And build a nice place there for some people to live in.
Chip Wilson. But how about an artist space?
I was in Seattle. We'll talk a bit more. I was in Seattle, and I couldn't believe how many buildings were with Bill and Melinda Gates on it. Like, these are the billionaires of Seattle, right? And they build stuff. They build these places, things, housing.
Because they don't need them to make money.
No, and it's their gift back to the city that gave them so much.
What a concept.
What a concept.
What a
there are many facilities like that. The actual the library in downtown Eastside, the one that used to be the library, the building on the corner of Main, and it's actually
Main and Hastings.
that building.
Yeah.
What's it called? Carnegie. Thank you. Carnegie is actually it was a guy who built an entrepreneur and a very rich person who built facilities, buildings across North America with his money.
So, oh my gosh, here's the Jody Naive statement of the day. We need like a chyron that comes up every time I do this. By way of our taxes that are allotted to the downtown east side, it's like $1 million a day, right? That goes into
that's hard to figure out, but there's
something like that.
Lots
Let's
of money
just say it's north of $365 million. We, the taxpayer, are the billionaire that are giving $365 million a year to the downtown east side, and nothing's happening to right because what we've all witnessed really, as soon as the mental health facilities used to be called institutions, not a pretty word, but the mental institutions that were shut down, people with no place to go and all kinds of issues were put in a position where they needed to find a way to self-medicate, which is what many addictions, street addictions certainly are born of. I speak with Mark Brand, Save on Meats, a Better Life Foundation, trying to end poverty down there. Sarah Blythe, saving lives daily, helping people who are suffering the fentanyl crisis, overdoses. Joe Leary, fellow broadcaster and good friend of ours, posted on Facebook that he actually witnessed, it was Commercial Drive, and
I think it was the Broadway station area.
Yeah,
that area.
Where he said he literally watched somebody go down and take their last breaths, and if not for well-meaning bystanding addicts who had the naloxone kit to bring him back to life, until paramedics who were overworked and traumatized. I mean, there's so many moving pieces to what we're watching happen here, and I don't know what my point is other than we're watching a slow motion train
I know,
wreck.
and but there is a group that had presented to council several times when I was there, in committee meetings as part of the Vancouver Coastal Health and the provincial government, who were trying to find a way to get these different groups that are down there. There's many different groups. Some of them have redundant roles to play, trying to find a way to how do we all get in the right track. We all want to solve this. How do we do this together? And all they kept reporting back to us was nothing, no progress at all. It's like, you guys are meeting these people and you're not getting any progress? Like,
right, but they're going and talking to the busiest people on the planet who are pretty much working for nothing.
But they have their it's territorial. The organizations don't want to, they have their space and they have their things and their mandates.
But the bureaucracy, and what I understand from those who I speak to down there when I do interviews, or I do go to the Greasy Spoon Diner at Save on Meats. It's a fundraiser. We're doing Plenty of Plates in September. It's another fundraiser just to get food to people who are starving. Because there are people on the downtown east side who don't get a meal a week. And then it's Welfare Wednesday, and that doesn't go to food, which is also sad, but that's not a reason for somebody to be on the streets starving. Like, there's so many things that when I talk to Mark Brand, he's like, I don't have time for red tape and bureaucracy and meeting upon meeting upon meeting, because every meeting that I'm at City Hall at, I'm not feeding somebody, and I pick them.
Right. So it's obviously complex.
Cyclical.
Let's start with the community plan.
You're wrong.
City can start with the community plan. Start with dealing with Oppenheimer Park. Make tough decisions like that. Deal with those things. Get the province and federal government on board for housing, but not all in the downtown east side, please. No. Across the province, across the country.
Right. You've got
and
that piece.
Talk about this issue where the NDP government, as we've talked about in the past, in the early 90s, decided to outsource mental health and the institutionalization. And they started the program, they had good ideas that they wanted to do. The second part never happened. And so they ended up closing these institutions down without proper planning for the follow-up. They had an idea, but they didn't actually implement it.
And then nobody wants a mental institution or facility in their backyard.
Yeah, now you can't build anything in any town.
Right.
And the NIMBY, we talked about that last week, NIMBY. So
we need to keep talking about this. We do. So at George_Affleck, at Jody Vance, at UnSpun Podcast.
We're so serious today.
I know, we're going to lighten it up. So we will. Actually, no, we won't. Lyft, though, we will. We'll talk about that. That's positive. Ian Tostenson and ridesharingnow.ca finally gets his moment.
Lyft and hopefully then Uber. Yeah.
Probably.
Can we talk about my Uber experience now in
Yes,
Seattle?
please. Tell me everything.
And then we'll get to your
Now we'll
brief.
talk about you first.
Well, no, I just think it's like, I was just in Seattle for the Rolling Stones concert. Seriously, at 76, if I'm like that, and just had heart surgery, you know, it was ridiculous. See how active and engaged and
talented
and appealing.
Hot. A nice one, Amanda.
It was crazy and impressive and commanding 60,000 people. Anyways, I got there in an Uber, and I got out of there in an Uber. I couldn't get a hotel room downtown, so I had to rely on Uber. It's just magical. I'm looking forward to.
And you're here to tell the tale.
I know. So just, let's go.
I love the fact that Lyft, even though being stared down by Claire Trevena, who was saying, like, you know, class 4 licenses are a must, and it's never going to work, and the fact that Lyft said, you know what, we're going to just come to Metro Vancouver. Unfortunately, not in the outlying areas where a lot of people need it as well, but we'll get there eventually.
On wine tours.
It'll do that eventually, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Totally. One of the things that came up for me, and I'm not sure if this might be a future column for me, is why is everybody talking about congestion with ride sharing, but nobody has a problem with food delivery services? So if you're not in the car, when the car gets your McDonald's that you're too lazy to go get on your own, that's not congestion. But if you get in a car and go to McDonald's, that's congestion. Same car.
Yeah, I don't get this whole argument, to be honest. I know that Richard Campbell is very active on Twitter about this, and he and I don't always see eye to eye, but he's always got a good sense of humor. But, you know, this issue of, and I think in Vancouver, we were the leader in ride sharing related to the Moto, because it changed its name, and
Car2Go. Yeah, I remember.
We're the leader in the world, even now. And the fact that we're so behind in this other system, and I believe that Vancouverites actually get rid of vehicles when they have access to this stuff.
No doubt.
Most of my friends don't have cars.
I get rid of my car.
I only have cars because I have so many damn kids.
Yeah.
And so, you know.
Okay, let's get to my column
them,
this week.
But I need to drive them around when especially growing up. You know that as a mom.
I'm doing it right now.
Soccer practice.
So UnSpun podcast on Twitter. I don't run the account. People learned that this week.
I don't either.
Especially
who the hell does?
Some fabulous, very tolerant, patient woman. Professional. Don't call her cute. Doogie. Okay, so this guy, what's his name? Doug Burton, I guess, was giving me all kinds of grief over last week's podcast when I mentioned that I thought, that I'm anti-Trump. Guess what? I am anti-Trump. But it's like, what are conservatives, this is his voice, my Twitter voice. What are conservatives and Republicans supposed to do then if they don't want a Democratic option? And I must be a total hater of all conservatives and Republicans. That's not at all true, because look at my summer ball cap. Can you see that?
I can read it for the podcast listeners. It's USS John S. McCain, DDG 56. So this is John McCain, the guy who ran for president for the Republicans?
And 3 generations of John McCains who have a ship in the U.S. Navy that when Donald Trump went to Japan, his supporters, his people in the White House staff had them move the USS John McCain out of sight because they didn't want to upset the president. That was June the 5th. When that happened, and I immediately Googled, where do I get a cap that supports, because I thought John McCain was awesome, even with brain cancer. He's coming in and making a vote to stand up for what's right. And did I like him and Sarah Palin as on the ticket? No. But that doesn't mean that I'm anti-him or anti-party. I just like people who pick people over party. Right. So that's my answer to Doogie on Twitter. Do your homework, because just this podcast doesn't define who George and I are, but we do talk for just under 30 minutes. Last but not least, on Twitter, took a lot of heat for suggesting that plastics should be not something that citizens...
Don't even bring it up. Oh my God, don't
no, I'm
start.
Just gonna,
go.
Okay, I won't. Read it at theorca.ca. The title, I think,
I'm glad you got the heat this week on Twitter, not me. I'm getting mine today now. So
are you?
Yeah. Well, I think my opinion about the downtown Eastside, you'll see some hate for sure. I mean, it's an opinion that people don't want to hear.
But people don't want to have the difficult discussions, and I think that's what we are here for, and that's why we don't invite guests on here, because we can have intelligent discourse.
Sorry, Brad West, you're off the...
But we got our Brad West mention in, and
you know what?
You did mention that
which represents about $4.3 million that we could find for cleaning streets in Vancouver. But anyways,
3 communications people in City Hall.
Too many.
Yeah, that's it for UnSpun. See you later.
Bye.